well, I'm going to share a couple of things now specifically in the little time that I've got left. Maybe we'll have part three. Part three. No, I'll share it quickly. Otherwise, we'll end up having a Vision Sunday for the rest of the year. So there's one of the things which God has given us a vision for is actually to plant an online church campus. And we have much to celebrate as a church. God has blessed us throughout the pandemic. When the church buildings were closed for the first time, we made a decision very, very early on to remain on Zoom. Right, we were already using Zoom, but we found that because that was a great way for us to connect during the week, that we would continue using that throughout our Sundays to actually keep the congregation together. Yeah. And it was at a time where many churches went to a broadcast format. And what happens is they lost touch with their congregation. Right. Pastors, I've had pastors in tears talking to me saying, I have no idea who's in my church anymore. Because they work hard at producing these messages and videoing them, and then they just send it out online, and they just never get to know whether they're being listened to. They don't know who's still part of their congregation or anything. And I just thank God that He prompted us to go down that Zoom route right at the beginning, because we were able to stay together as a congregation all the way through the pandemic. And in fact, as we stayed together, we found that God continued to bless us as a church, and we actually grew. Not least of which is Stan's Table. Stan's Table has seen the greatest church growth of all. We've literally just bought a big computer so that we can run everything in the hopes that we would cut down the size of the stuff. And I arrived today on the first day that we were running it up, and I see even more stuff now than we had before. So it really is a sight to behold. You should go and have a look, and this is why Stan needs to have a co-pilot. So anyway, we actually managed to grow throughout COVID because God continued to lead us, because we were listening. Right? That's another spiritual principle. Listen. Spend time listening to God in prayer, and He will guide you by His Spirit. But we found that as we've been coming back into the auditorium after the lockdowns and the buildings being shut, is we faced the challenge of how do we come back and still have our online people fully engaged. Give me a wave, all those people online. There you go, look at that. You see, they are. They're awake and they're engaged. We somehow managed to do it. Okay? How did we do that? That was a challenge for us. And how do we come back, have people fully engaged? Not everybody feels safe to come back though. There are those people who might be immunocompromised. There might be, we're in winter as well, which, again, doesn't help. All right. But, there are people who don't feel safe to come back for many, many different reasons. And in fact, we've got those who we've just grown online, and really online church is all that they've known. And so as we come back into this scenario where we've got people online, we've got people here in the auditorium, we've gone to this kind of hybrid scenario where we've got what we have here. And we found that we've had to compromise on many, many different kinds of levels, that we actually can't fully serve the people online properly because they're online and we're essentially running an in-person service. And yet there's also compromises that we've made here, but we've been doing it. It's been a challenge, but we've been doing it and we've been successful in many, many respects. But it's become apparent that we cannot effectively serve our church community in a hybrid environment as we look to the future and look to going forward. Because of that compromise needed on both sides, we've got people online who need to be pastored and they're just not getting that effectively. We need to have, it's a totally different context, really. Being online at home is very different to being in person in an auditorium. And so the needs of a congregation live and the needs of a congregation online are actually quite different. And so we feel that we can do this better by actually planting an online campus where we can fully devote the time that is needed and the resources that are needed to make sure that they feel as though they're getting church, right? Yeah. And those who are here in the auditorium, that we can continue to go as we feel the Spirit leading. So really, we're going to be having 2 campuses. So, during the month of fasting and prayer, I've had this idea, this thought just keep on bubbling away in the back of my mind. What if we actually separated the 2? And I prayed about it and I talked to the leadership team about it and really just never felt that the timing was right or that we really had a green light from the Lord on it. But while we had this month of fasting and prayer in January, the Lord gave me this following scripture. It comes from Nehemiah chapter 10 and verse 28. It says, the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the musicians, the temple servants, and all who separated themselves from the neighboring people for the sake of the Lord God, together with their wives and their sons and daughters who are able to understand. Now that's kind of a bit strange. It sounds a little bit out of context, but as I was reading this and as the Lord directed me to Nehemiah, these words just jumped out at me that are in yellow. So separating themselves from the neighboring peoples. As we look to planting an online church campus, what we're doing is we're going to be separating them from this hybrid scenario so that we can focus on our online people, our online congregation. And those who are here and come to the auditorium, we can focus on pastoring them and leading them. So those words really jumped out as I was reading this passage. And then together with their wives and their sons and their daughters, those who are able to understand. And so here's the call. So for those who understand the vision, those who understand the need and get a witness in their spirit that they want to be part of this online campus, then there is a call. That maybe you need to join the online campus. Maybe you need to become part of that core team that we're going to pull together so that we can actually bring real leadership into this as a church in its own right, or a campus in its own right. So if you're feeling that as a sense of God, then that could be the Holy Spirit speaking to you. So if you understand the vision and understand why, that could be a reason to come up and see me afterwards, and we can talk about that further. So we're going to be creating 2 campuses. Now, this month, before the 27th of February, I believe it is that our incorporation deadline? No. It's 27th of February, so we're nearly there. Yeah. Okay, on 27th of February, we actually have a deadline to surrender or put in our application for incorporation. Incorporation for us then is that we become an entity as an organisation legally. In Canada, we can apply for our own charitable status as well. And it's just one of those things that church plants, which we are, eventually hopefully get to that place where they can do that and they can sustain that. So it's a good thing for us to do this. So what we're going to be doing is, as we incorporate, we're going to be incorporating into and restructuring into a church that is able to plant churches and plant campuses. So that's actually what we're incorporating and how we're going to restructure things. So as we look to having an online campus, that'll happen after we've received our corporation status and after we've got our charitable status. So it's something that will already have the framework, if you like. Because that's really what it is. It's a trellis. How many people have a trellis at home? A gardening trellis? Right. So you know that if you've got a climbing rose, okay, which you're all growing for your wives for Valentine's Day, if you've got a climbing rose, right, and you don't have a trellis to tie the rose back to, what happens to it? It flops on the ground, it gets trampled on, the animals eat it, and you end up with no roses. When you have a trellis, that thing can grow up straight and produce much flowers and multiply, providing lots of nectar for bees and things like that. And there's lots of life that happens then around that. And that's what this incorporation is. It's simply a trellis for us to grow effective ministry and multiply effective ministry. So, this vision for an online campus will be to pioneer our online Christian community for those who are not able to gather in the local congregation. And I am really excited about this. I'm really excited as we're looking to nurture a new community of people that actually exist outside the four walls of a traditional church. A people that can gather together and grow community of faith together and live missionally in where they live. Because those who join from online are joining from home. And so we want to have this focused around what does that look like for a community of faith that are at home and then living on mission in their location. And that's something that is really exciting because we get to do it outside the confines and the constrictions and constraints of the four walls of a building. And so there are lots and lots of really good, exciting things and potential for this to happen. So by creating two campuses, we can better minister to these two congregations, and we can develop ministry leaders to meet the unique and differing needs of these two congregations. So, if you're excited about that, if you can see the potential of that, then maybe God is speaking to you and prompting you. And I would urge you and encourage you to go to prayer about that and continue to pray. The next thing that we're going to be having a look at here is a vision of healing and renewal for our worship ministry. And I want to tell you a bit of the story, and we're going to run over time. So I'm going to make no apologies for that. Right? If I do see you walking out, I won't take offense, right? I'll just assume that you've actually got something else that you desperately need to be at. But you're not allowed to go. So I want to speak to you, and I want to tell you a little bit of a story around what's happened over this month of fasting and prayer. On Monday, the 24th of January, it was during this month of fasting and prayer, I'm sitting in my front room and I'm listening to the Lord in prayer. And God gives me a picture. And in this picture, if you can imagine it, I'm looking from top down. So it's like I'm floating on the ceiling, right? And I'm looking down. And what I see is I see a person sitting at a piano keyboard. They're dressed in white. They've got their hands out at either end of the keyboard and they're ready to play. And as I'm looking at this picture, I notice that somewhere up in the treble end of the keyboard, there's one of the black keys is broken. It's actually broken off. It's broken in half, and there's part that's missing. And as I continued to look at this picture, and I asked the Lord to reveal, what does this mean? What are you trying to say to me through this picture? The Lord showed me that there has been an assignment against the worship ministry in our church, and that He wants to bring healing and renewal to our worship ministry. Amen. So that's what the Lord revealed in the big picture. So the enemy targets worship ministry, and he targets worship leaders. Did you know that? We need to be praying for our worship leaders. We need to be praying for our worship ministry. We need to be praying for Josiah and for Sherry, who come and just help us so incredibly once a month. Unfortunately, I wish it could be more. But you know, Josiah travels around and leads worship in many other churches. And he sows into our ministry. And we're so grateful for you guys and what you're doing. The worship earlier was just wonderful. Thank you. So you know, God, the enemy targets worship ministry because worship is vitally important to the life of a church. Do you know, we're not created for anything else, but first of all, to worship the Lord our God and to lift up His name. Every single one of us is a worshipper, and we're created to worship. And the enemy knows that, and he hates it. Why? Because right at the very beginning, we see Satan trying to draw worship to himself because he wants to sit on God's throne. And so he targets churches, he targets worship leaders, he targets worship ministry. And through what I saw, God revealed to us that he's had an assignment against worship in our church. And that is why, as I've been reflecting back on the years that I've been here as a pastor, we've always had problems in the area of the worship ministry. We just always have. And though we've tried so many things to try and really kick it off and to get it going, we've just come against roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. Because the enemy's been assigned against it. Well, thanks be to God. He has revealed the plans of the enemy. We've already begun to pray, and we will continue to pray, that not only does the enemy get completely routed, and I believe he is, because God has decreed to us that he is going to bring healing and renewal to our whole worship ministry. So enemy is on the run. His plans have been revealed. We know what his plans are and what he's been trying to do. And we're not going to allow him to continue to take any more ground from us as far as worship goes. So naturally, as I began to think about and pray into what God was showing me, I was getting really excited about a renewal happening in our worship ministry. So this was it was in the morning. On Monday, I got this picture. On Wednesday, Bruce and Suzanne come round to my place, and at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they say, guess what? We feel that God is calling us to go and do some worship in another church. And I'm thinking, no. No, he's not. He isn't really. And so as they're sharing this with me, I got my pastor's face on, right? Just listening to them, right? And in my heart, I'm going, no, this can't be, Lord. You've just told me that you're going to bring renewal to my worship ministry, and now I've got my keyboard player. It's now leaving. I was like, but as they're talking and they're sharing their heart and they're sharing how the Lord has been speaking to them and leading them, I'm listening. I'm listening to what the Spirit of God is saying to me in the midst of it. And he reminds me that I'm bringing healing to this ministry and I'm going to renew it. And I recognized in that moment that actually this move for them is a healing move. That God is actually releasing them into fruitful ministry into this other church so that they can be healed and be restored and actually increase the gifts and the calling which God has upon their life. And so I'm going, okay, Lord, you must know what you're doing. You must know what you're doing. It always helps to keep an ear out to the Lord, even when you're talking to somebody else, right? So anyway, that's at 1 o'clock, and I'm going, oh, Lord, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? You're going to bring restoration. This is all part of his plan. And so you have to make a decision right at those particular moments in time when God has given a word and then God begins to act very fast upon these words, right? Because this is like Monday, this is Wednesday lunchtime, right? God's moving quickly in this. Is that you just make a faith stance and you say, okay, God, this is what you're saying. So I'm going to walk with you in it. Even though I can't see very far down the line, even though I haven't seen the whole picture, how you're going to do it, how you're going to work it all out, we still have to maintain that stance that says, God, I trust you. I trust you in what you're saying. I'm trusting in what you're revealing to us. And we will walk in it and we will see you bring it to pass. Bruce and Suzanne came to me on the Wednesday at 1 o'clock and they said, yeah, we need to leave. And I just want to commend them. I want to commend them because they're an example of how to leave a church well. Okay? Is that they felt a sense from the Lord and they came to me. They didn't just kind of like disappear into the night, right, and drift off, okay? But they actually came and they revealed, as hard as it was for them, because they didn't know how I was going to react, right? I mean, I could have reacted really badly, right? Fortunately, they caught me in the middle of fasting and prayer. But they're not leaving with a grudge,
That's right.
right? They're not leaving with a heavy, well, it may be a heavy heart, but they're not leaving with a hurt heart.
That's right.
Okay, whatever hurts they may have had, we prayed about them. They've forgiven people. They're moving on with a right heart, and they're actually an example of how to lead well. Yeah. So thank you both for that. Thank you for your maturity in that. Even though I know it's not always easy, we've had to do the same. You know, it was really difficult when we've left, churches before, for all the reasons that, for the offences and stuff like that we've been caused. No, we've moved on. No, when God calls you on, you just have to leave. And you're leaving family. Yeah. It's not easy leaving family any more than when your kids leave home, which I haven't gone through yet, but but others have. You know what it's like. So, I emailed the leadership team in the afternoon, and I just let them know that Bruce and Suzanne were moving on, and there was a couple of other things that I need to share with them about what the Lord had been speaking to me about. And as I was writing to them, I was writing about that Nehemiah 10 passage that we just read, and the Lord started revealing to me another facet of it. I'll read it out again, but have a look at the highlights here. The rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, and the musicians, temple servants, and all who separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the Lord. Where are they moving to? Bruce and Suzanne, you're moving, separating from us, musician, and you're going to neighbor's church. And so God begins, even as I'm typing it out, God begins to reveal to me and give me another confirmation. And again, this is how God works. Gives me another confirmation that this is from Him. Okay, this isn't about people's desires, but God's actually in this. And so, when God was giving me more confirmation that He is going to bring renewal to our worship ministry, and when God gives a picture, He doesn't waste anything. There's significance from the aspect that I was looking at, because I was looking down on top of a keyboard player. And so God is going to be bringing renewal to our worship ministry from top down. Hallelujah. From top down. So, most of you will know Chris and Marilyn here have joined us from Toronto, and you've come here and you've established yourself here and putting roots down in our church, and we want to thank God for that. Yes. Yes. Well, God, when He says something, always goes before, right? And I'm sure that there's been much sowing that Chris and Marilyn have done before they've arrived here. But Chris has actually been in worship ministry for 30 years. And he's been leading and developing worship teams in 6 different churches for the past 20. Oh, and he was worship director for March for Jesus in Niagara. Most of you should remember March for Jesus. You're grey enough in the hair to remember March for Jesus. Right? I remember March for Jesus. So Chris has agreed to partner with us in building this renewed worship ministry. Amazing. So where God always provides for the vision. And so I just want to thank God for bringing Chris and Marilyn here, and they're going to continue to be building into this renewed worship ministry. So the assignment that was against worship ministry, as I've said, has been exposed. This is God's kairos time. Not chronos, the time, which everybody's looking at their watch, right? That's chronos time, okay? Thinking, when's this guy going to shut up? That's chronos time, right? This is kairos time, which is the now time, the right time, the instantaneous time where God is beginning to move. This is a moment in time that God has for us in our church and in this worship ministry, that this kairos time is God's time, that He is going to bring renewal to our worship ministry here for His glory. Yeah. Amen? Amen? So we want to give thanks to what God is doing in our midst. So, Amen. In response to that, I'm actually going to be giving a call for every musician and every person who has a voice that they think could be used for God's glory to actually step up and join in this ministry, this renewed worship ministry. So that is the call that is going out. So I'm going to invite Josiah to come up. He's going to lead us in a worship song together. What I want you to do is, as you've been listening to this, I want you to just be asking the Lord, is this something, Lord, that you are quickening to me? Do I have musical gifts? Do I play a musical instrument? I've already spoken to the kids downstairs. It looks like they're going to try and get a worship band together, a youth worship band. How exciting is that?
Very cool.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So they've already been doing stuff downstairs, right? But for us, I'm sending a call out. God's Spirit is in this. He said that He's going to bring renewal to our worship ministry. Will you step forward and will you join this renewed worship team? We're going to sing. Josiah's going to lead us. I want you to ask the Lord as we sing together. Lord, are you asking me? Are you asking me to be part of this? And then as we finish this song, I'm going to invite those who want to respond to come up and we're going to pray for you.